Thank you for having me today. My name is Bill Ulrich, William in print, but Bill. And I am speaking today on behalf or representing Business Architecture Guild. My topic is delivering business value through business architecture. So we'll talk about that today. Heavy on the value proposition. I am a consultant. Tactical Strategy Group is a company I've had for the last 30 plus years. I'm also a trainer with Business Architecture Associates. Those two companies are my day job. My role at the Guild is as a volunteer. So I do a good bit of work with them. So we're going to be covering today, and I should say I've been consulting in business and IT transformation for well over 40 years. So I'm probably dating myself, but it's just a little bit of background. So what I want to talk about today and really get into is business architecture, the value it brings, and then in this sort of the short period I have of time, I want to go through a few focal points. And I will take questions at the end. So if people can certainly stack those up, and I will be responding to those with our moderator near the end of the session today. Formal definition, it's always useful to have a definition of things. And as a business architect, it's something we're quite focused on. But more important, I think, as well, is the value proposition of what business architecture brings to the table. The formal definition, and this has been around, it came actually originally out of the object management group, the standards body, international standards body. We'll look at a standard later from them. But essentially a blueprint of the enterprise, or think about your business ecosystem, provides a common understanding of the organization. So everybody from the strategic planning team, business leaders, architects, the business rank and file professionals, IT folks, developers, designers, and so forth have the same perspective, although more detail at one end, less detail at the other, more summary level at one end, more granular at the other, to focus on delivering strategic objectives and tactical demands, which is pretty much our theme today. Value proposition, business architecture enables effective, streamlined strategy execution. I'm going to be talking about a strategy execution framework here. This is courtesy of the Business Architecture Guild, and we'll give you a little more information about the Guild as we go. One of the challenges that organizations face, and I could have filled this whole page and many more pages with statistics on the challenges organizations face in terms of strategy execution, is the failure to successfully execute on their business strategies. There's a number of stats out there saying organizations feel they're pretty good at setting strategy, but not so good at achieving strategy. There's a corollary statistic here based on 25 years of Standish Group research that fewer than 30% of programs and projects are delivered successfully. That means they're running over budget, they are under delivering, and they are taking way longer than they should. There's lots of examples out there, but when I talk to people who have been in the trenches for many years, generally the feedback I get is, yeah, that's normal. That's pretty much the way things are. So that's a difficult way to get across to delivering on your strategies. One of the more disconcerting statistics is that 9 out of 10 business leaders can see they are missing major market opportunities. This is from a PwC strategy paper. That is really problematic because you fall behind if you cannot be competitive. Even if you're a government organization, you're under delivering on your mission, right? So there's a lot of challenges organizations face. So successful strategy execution relies on a clear perspective from strategy formulation, which we're seeing this framework here for the first time, 5 stages, up at the front end, through solution deployment at the back end. The 5 stages, which I'll break down a little more in the next slide, essentially take you through setting strategy, determining impact, understanding what the future looks like based on that strategy, framing your initiative plans and your investments, and then executing on an iterative delivery basis. So if we break this down further, we can talk a little bit more about the value business architecture brings to end-to-end strategy execution and how and why that makes it more successful. And we'll give you a little more on business architecture in some follow-up slides. So if I talk about stage one, I'd like to define my strategies with full confidence of understanding the business ecosystem. Oh, we need to fix this over here. Well, this same thing is happening in these other places across these different business units. Why don't we focus on those as well at the same time and get the right people in the room to have that conversation? So that can even affect your strategy setting. Or we'd like to do this, but we really don't have the capabilities in place to do that. So that's sort of upfront. You can define a more workable strategy, I guess is how one would put it, if you can do that up front. But then we go into a much more of a formal impact assessment. And as a business architect and some of the other architects involved in this, EAs and so on, you would want to be able to move very, very quickly. We'll talk about how to move through this and get to solution deployments very quickly. There's very little time to wait, especially if you're into planning cycles on an annual basis and you have just a handful of weeks or maybe less in some cases to provide your insights and input. You don't have a whole lot more time than that, so you have to have a baseline to move quickly. But what you want to say is, the scope is this big. Can we still continue investing in that? There's a feedback loop that goes back, if you need to the planners so they can understand all this. And then one would move into understanding what the solution, the future looks like. If we want to implement this strategy, our data architecture needs to change in this way. If we want to implement this strategy, we need to have a much more rationalized perspective of our software environment. If we want to do this, we need to change maybe the organization design. Maybe we need to invest in a different approach to work management and work management design. Once we understand those things and we understand what the future looks like, we want to move into initiative planning. Streamlined, not unsiloed, ideally, initiatives. Those are investments that we're going to make in deploying solutions. And we're using the term initiatives as a generic term. Whatever you want to use in your organization is fine. That can certainly break down if you're using Agile into a series of sprints and so forth. And then through a series of iterative, highly agile, highly interoperable, highly optimized deliveries, we're going to deploy solutions. This can work for anything. You can use it for COTS or off-the-shelf packages. You can use it for upgrades to existing systems. A lot of the focus here is on major transformations and getting to the new. But this strategy execution framework works really for anything. I will point out that in reality, in practice, and one of the underlining elements of the statistics you see is people try to set strategy. They say, I want to do this. Instead of saying, I want to do this business objective or achieve it, they say, I want to do this thing, which is an action item or a course of action without an objective behind it. And then they jump to set up a project and then jump to stage 5 and start implementing. We don't understand the impact. We don't understand where we're going to go. We try to figure that out as we go at the back end. It puts everybody in the effort in an awkward position, and we end up delivering something that's not really useful. So where does business architecture play a role? It plays a role at all 5 stages. We just talked about that. What does business architecture look like? Well, essentially, formal representations of the business ecosystem. We use that term instead of enterprise because it's a better scoping term. And we want to be able to represent it from 2 perspectives. One is from what we call a core business architecture domain perspective of the capabilities we have, the information we use, the value streams that deliver value to our stakeholders, and the organizational structure. Then to practice or deploy business architecture, and stakeholders are probably at the top of that list, we would have our strategies, our policies, stakeholders, of course, the products we deliver to customers, end customers, the initiatives we invest in, and then the metrics that sort of represent all of this. If we have all of these things, we're very mature on the scale. You don't need them all to get started. You certainly don't need them all to move into strategy execution and start doing this work. What we want to start is a minimally viable baseline. We'll talk about how to get there quickly in a little bit using the concept of reference models. But a minimally viable baseline for business architecture is an ecosystem-wide, and that's at level 1, level 2 capability maps. So you don't skip things because you think it's going to save time. It costs you more time to skip things, but you would have a capability map that represents your ecosystem, an information map that parallels it. So every business object in the capability map is represented by an information concept, and then the essential value streams. You don't need all of them fully worked out, but the important ones that you need to invest in, you want. That allows you to launch into strategy execution end to end. And if you need to build out other things along the way, you can do that real time. Because business architectures are not static. They should never be static. They should evolve as they're used. And evolve means more detail, more granularity, more domain representations, and so forth. How do I want to set this up? Well, first of all, I'll start from the bottom. I need a knowledge base to store this metadata. If I don't have a formal knowledge base, and if my main tool is Excel or Visio, I can't scale my business architecture practice. It just frankly becomes unwieldy, even at the most minimalistic level, right? So as soon as you need to start cross-checking and cross-mapping things, I need a repository of that metadata that everybody can get into in a tool-enabled, standards-aligned meta model. I'll talk about some standards for that a little later and how those form. But essentially, I need to be able to capture not just this information, but extending it to connect to the IT architecture and to other business disciplines. Then I need to be able to have on-demand and ad hoc information out of there. We call those our blueprints. Those can come in many forms. One example is a capability map, and other examples in an information to capability map cross-mapping, and the list goes on and on and on from there. And then to really understand how to practice, I want to have basic scenarios. If you're a really experienced business architect, you can do these in your head. But for most business architects, it's nice to have some sort of formal set of scenarios that you can kind of work out as you go. So that's sort of the baseline. Let me talk a little bit about differentiators and then get into a little more on the usage and context. Business architecture, why is it different? It's holistic. Except for the organization map, it really looks across and beyond the business architectures or the business silos or boundaries. We're not constrained by that happens in this business unit, this happens in that business unit. We look at it as a whole. We assess it as a whole. We invest and change that ecosystem in a holistic and whole fashion. It's persistent. We build it once. That's our baseline. We evolve it, right? And it's not linked to a given strategy, program, project, or investment. It is persisted and reused over and over again in the knowledge base. It starts, and one of the key factors is having an outside-in view. An external stakeholder perspective on value delivery is really key. There's a view on value creation. How do I create value? And value consumption. How does the stakeholder, whether it be my customer or an internal stakeholder or partner, how do they gain value as I go, both incrementally and then over the long term? Related practices, it makes them better, right? If I have a business architecture, I can be more articulate and in my scoping of my requirements. If I have a business architecture and I can tie it to my customer experience, I can improve the customer experience more quickly. Strategic planning, product management, work management, Agile, it can be integrated with Agile. IT architecture, of course, plays a role across the board. A different way about thinking about organizations, it is. Some people, when they're first learning this, are a little uncomfortable, but it is a very different way of looking at an organization. It's essentially breaking down the ecosystem into a series of rationalized business objects and actions against those objects. I just defined what a capability is. I'm also looking at end-to-end stakeholder value delivery that's enabled by capabilities, so I have to connect those parts. And I'm also looking at enabling planning execution teams to view the organization as a whole, which we talked about. These are some sample scenarios. We call these macro scenarios. There are micro scenarios, but let me just run through a couple of these quickly. So say I want to shift from a customer-centric, from a product-centric or business unit-centric business model where everything is siloed and the customer is replicated across each silo. I want to move to a customer-centric business model where I have one viewer customer. I can go there and I can see all the agreements they have with the different business units. Let's say I'm a financial institution. I can see that they've got this type of investment, that type of investment, or I'm an insurance company and I can see that they have these different insurance products and so forth. So I want to have one view of the customer. That's a big shift. Business architecture is ideal for these types of major scaled transformations. It also works for small things, like I want to expedite underwriting end to end for my insurance products or my financial products. I want to not only expedite it, but I want to make sure that I improve my risk assessments during my underwriting and deliver things that are going to not be defaulted or induce a lot of claims later. So those are what we call micro scenarios. So scenarios help you frame your thinking, especially if you're a new business architect. Frame your thinking about how you want to use and apply. It's really critical to understand scenarios because that's where the value is delivered back to the business. And you want to move from as quickly as possible and as transparently as possible from building out a business architecture to using a business architecture where the value is. So you want to move very quickly into that. I want to say a word about business architecture and artificial intelligence. It falls across really two categories. I'm not sure either one of these are widely deployed yet. And I know AI is all over organizations around the globe, and many organizations are providing AI insights. But there's really two areas. One is, can I use my business architecture knowledge base and apply intelligent technology to that? And it also extends into IT domains to serve as a source for automating or expediting end-to-end strategy execution. Can I maybe make more intelligent assessments of the strategies I want to pursue based on AI insights into the knowledge base? Can I do a rapid impact assessment that's highly automated or automated assist? Can I help frame future state? If I have this particular situation and I have this particular current state, and I know I want to go to this future state based on what's in the business architecture and what's been articulated, can I use AI to build out more intelligent data architectures and solution architectures? Right? Can I automate that? Can I automate some of my analysis downstream? Can I move more quickly through the deployment and software design and software creation and deployment? Can I move all the way seamlessly from strategy execution through solution deployment with a high AI assist? If you have a rigorous, well-defined knowledge base with the information I showed and more, I'm not showing the whole picture, I'm just showing sort of the core set. If you have that in your knowledge base, you can do that. The second area where we can really bring value is in business-driven designs and software solutions that can be built in such a way that can incrementally move from, today it's manual, right? This work queue is manual. It's managed by one of our leads, to an automated assist where it starts to do some of the work, to full automation and basically turning the decision-making over to AI. And incrementally automating it. And there's ways to do this and ways the business architecture supports that. And there's work management designs that support that around dynamic rules-based routing and so forth that I'm not really getting into in a lot of depth here, but those are some options. If you're interested in the first bullet, there's a link here to the Cognitive Enterprise Envisioning the Business of the Future. It's a paper I did a couple years ago. How do I set it up? Yes, question?
Bill, I'm sorry, we're just running short on time.
Okay.
It's absolutely fascinating. So I think we actually need to move to one of the questions. There were quite a few questions in the chat, but we're just picking
Okay,
one.
let me wrap this up really quickly, okay?
Sure, okay.
This is the Center of Excellence. I think it kind of speaks to itself. There are a couple industry standards. They are both heavily influenced by business architecture and the BizBock Guide, which is the body of knowledge from the Business Architecture Guild. And this is some background on the Guild. I think you're all getting a copy of the PDF. If you're interested, individuals can join at a very low amount. And there are also corporate memberships. And then if you want to move forward, get yourself educated. Don't go by hearsay or go by rumor what you think business architecture is. Get into it, get certified. If you're an organization, start with the value proposition. Don't start by bringing it in and trying to sell it, upscale it. Deliver on the value and find out why it's important for your organization to be able to bring that value. Okay, let's turn it over for questions.
Thank you so much, Bill. You've already managed to, there's a lot of really interesting content, and sorry to make you have to squeeze it like this.
That's okay.
One of the questions that we thought was interesting from the chat is someone made a remark about process. They're wondering, does processes, is that a part of this business architecture framework?
No, and I'll tell you why.
Okay, tell me why.
It is first of all, it's an operating model concept. It is a how do I implement this concept, right? And process flows in the traditional sense. And I know there's high level and low level processes, but process flows in the low level sense basically expand complexity based on exception processing. As you try to get the last 10% of the exceptions, the thing bloats up to scale. If I use that as a baseline for creating software, I create bloated software systems. If you use a business architecture, there's a technique called dynamic rules-based routing, where I can actually design a state machine-based event-driven solution that accommodates exceptions without exploding, and it becomes a much leaner solution. They are not, you can still use processes, that's fine. Don't get me wrong. But they are not part of business architecture because they're continuously changing based on operational decisions and situations. The architecture is not.
Interesting. Thank you so much, Bill, for taking out your time to share these ideas and best practices with us today. It's been great having you. See you soon. Thanks again, Bill.
If people have more questions, they can always email me or follow up.
Of course.
Okay. Thank you.